Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Today, we'd like to begin the roundtable under the theme of Inclusive Curation Disability Art as Radical Movement, co-hosted by ARKO Arts Center and Goethe-Institut Korea. And before we dive into the sessions, we'd like to have the introduction from the director Lim Gun-hae, as well as Melanie Bono. Thank you. Hello, I'm Director Kunal Lim from ARKO Arts Center. I'm female in 50s and I have short hair and I'm wearing this black shirt. Really nice to meet all of you. And this is a part of our online project Prism, which we launched this year, especially under the theme of inclusive curation. But the Institute Korea has been operating the hidden project for almost a year to increase and raise awareness of the disability art. And it gave us a great opportunity to have relevant discussions. And through this roundtable, we like to discuss the inclusive curation, disability art as radical movement. And I'd like to hand over my mic to Melanie.
My name is Melanie Bono and I'm the head of program at the Goethe-Institut in Korea. The Goethe-Institut is the cultural institute of Germany. I am a woman in my mid-40s and I have medium-length black hair that I have tied into a ponytail. My bangs are sided on the right side and are reaching the middle of my face on the left side. I have dark brown eyes and I'm wearing a black dress that looks like a sweater in the screen now. We are very happy to work together with ARKO Art Center on this important topic. In East Asia, the Goethe Institutes of the region have set a special focus on the topic of inclusive curating since last year. The workshop series that has already been mentioned, the Hidden Project, was initiated by Goethe-Institut Shanghai and connected professional curators and experts from Toronto, Berlin, Seoul, Tokyo, Kyoto, Hong Kong, Taipei, Shanghai, Beijing, and Ulaanbaatar to explore and discuss different inclusive curatorial practices and concepts of accessibility. And I'm very much looking forward to our online session today and hope that this will be one of many more opportunities to learn and share about inclusivity in arts and culture. Thank you all for joining into the conversation.
Hi, everyone. First of all, a very big thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm Kate Brehme, and as the introduction said, I'm an independent curator and arts educator. I identify as a woman. I have very short, dark, curly hair, which is quite short, almost shaved at the back and the sides, and the top is quite curly and a little bit messy. I wear dark black-rimmed glasses, quite big glasses, and today I'm wearing bright red lipstick and some gold earrings and a bright red cardigan. It's quite cold here in Berlin. I'm also a white person as well. So I thought I would begin today by talking a little bit about, and I think the most important thing to point out is that disability arts has actually always been a part of art history. It's still very much a part of contemporary art production today as well. And I guess the main question should really be, how is disability art presented and perceived within the arts? And what things need to change there in order for us to truly embrace inclusion or accessibility within contemporary art production and presentation? So there's actually many different definitions of disability arts, and there's no consensus in the field. There's no, group of artists who all agree that disability arts is exactly the same thing. Disability doesn't mean the same thing for different people with disabilities. And thus disability arts also doesn't mean the same thing for everybody. It means something differently. And there are different histories as well. And I'll explain a little bit about that in a minute. I often speak from not just my professional perspective as a curator who's been working within the field of disability arts for over 15 years now, actually maybe more like 20 years now when I think about it. But I also speak from the perspective of somebody with a disability. So I have a chronic illness that I've had since I was a child. It's something that I have learnt to live with and work alongside. And I think for me, what was really important was recognizing that disability within my personal and my professional life was something that I needed to recognize in order to survive. So in order to survive things like ableism, in order to survive a working environment within the contemporary arts that isn't always the most helpful or sympathetic towards people who have different bodies and different needs. And many different artists with all kinds of disabilities identify as quite proud disabled people. So just to kind of underline, there's no clear consensus on what disability arts is. And that's really important to think about when we're working with different artists with different kinds of disabilities, and we're working with the field of disability arts in general. So I think one of the biggest problems within art history is that art history has done a fantastic job of categorizing people with disabilities who work in the arts as producing work that is of inferior quality to those who don't have disabilities, or that their work should always be seen as outside that of so-called mainstream contemporary art, and that the aesthetic is different and will always be different just because the artist has a disability. And this is especially true of work by artists with learning disabilities, for example, and particularly true to those artists who have mental illnesses. And we see this within the label of outsider arts. That's a very well-known, well-established, I guess, subcategory within contemporary art. And while a lot of artists embrace that and are quite happy to be within the realm of outsider arts because it is a means for them to be able to produce work within a structure that supports them, there are still a lot of underlying ableist concepts that built that very idea of outsider arts to begin with. It's in the name, outsider art. You're already othered within the contemporary art sphere. So what we need to recognize is that just as we're working within contemporary art and other fields of culture to undo the injustices of how people of color, or colonial subjects have been misrepresented throughout history by white people or colonialism, we also need to retell the stories of disabled people. And we need to retell them from disabled people's perspectives. It's often very much the case that disability is a form of identity within identity politics that gets left behind when we're looking at creating a diverse or inclusive contemporary art sector. We talk a lot about how we need to undo colonialism. We talk a lot about race issues and addressing racism, both within arts institutions, in their infrastructures, and also in terms of representing marginalized voices, marginalized artists throughout contemporary art history. It's no different for people with disabilities, but it is very often the case that they are left off completely when we're doing a lot of this justice work within the arts. It should be acknowledged that disabled people in general, just like other marginalized peoples, have their own histories and culture. And I say histories because we have various different movements that happened around the globe, not just in one place. We have different stories, different groups, different individuals that have fought very hard across the world to fight for disabled people's rights. So we take maybe a really good example, deaf people, for example, have their own culture, their own language, and have also fought for their right to have that language and culture thrive within a society that has actively sought to suppress deaf culture and deaf language. And so we're seeing a lot of artists making work about this theme and really trying to uncover those histories and show them to the world. And in doing that and having a place and presence in gallery spaces, we're undoing a lot of that ableist practices that happen within contemporary art. I was also asked to talk about how disability art as a radical movement, or how the perception of disability art as a radical movement has been changing within the contemporary art scene. And I would say it depends very much on what part of the scene you're looking at and what part of contemporary art practice you're looking at and what part of the world you're looking at. As I said, there are various different histories and different ways in which different cultures and countries respond to those histories. But I think foremost, what's the most important is that the rewriting or repositioning of disabled people within the arts is a radical political act. And all the more so if it can be done by disabled people themselves. So we talk about access from a very practical perspective, especially one that is usually applied to arts audiences. So building ramps, ensuring talks are interpreted into sign language, for example, rather than to arts workers. So we often sort of leave out the fact that arts workers can have disabilities as well. However, it's an immense symbolic and powerful gesture that ultimately creates a more diverse and thus realistic reflection of society within the arts. The perception that disability arts can be viewed as a radical movement. But I think despite all of that, and perhaps just to wrap up my input for today's talk, a lot of the most interesting work that's being done here is being done by disabled arts leaders and their allies. Just recently, I worked together with disabled and queer author Kenny Freeze, who is originally from the US, has been based here in Germany for quite some time. We worked together with the Schwules Museum in Germany, which is the gay museum celebrating the history of gay people, lesbians, other people who have alternative lifestyles or alternative sexual orientation. A really important community museum here in Berlin, who took on the challenge to curate with us an exhibition looking at the intersection between queer and disabled histories. So looking at people who identify as both queer and disabled. A really groundbreaking exhibition that hadn't been done before, at least not that we knew of within a European, US, UK context. And the exhibition was incredibly important in that it was led by disabled people. So myself and Kenny were very much integrating aspects of access into the exhibition. And the museum thus learned from that process, and then will hopefully go on and take what they learned from that experience into their future planning. So these projects, these initiatives are extremely important, not just because it gives people like myself and my colleagues who have disabilities to be able to share our voices, but it means real change. It means real infrastructural change. It means that when we work with our non-disabled allies, we can pass on our knowledge and our experiences about inclusive curating. And it means that some of the power imbalances that exist in the contemporary art sector can be addressed, and then new narratives and new histories created. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me talk, and I look forward to hearing your questions. Thanks.
Hello everyone, nice to meet you. Can you hear me well? So first and foremost, I would like to introduce our center, the Seoul Creative Arts Center for the Disabled. And to be honest, we have been being operated for the last 15 years under the name of Seoul Creative Studio. This is the first organization made for culture and visual arts for the disabled here in Korea. We established ourselves in 2007, and because this Jamsil Sports Stadium is under construction, we moved our location to Dongseung-dong in Seoul, and we also changed our name into Seoul Creative Arts Center for the disabled. So before, going into the presentation, I should have mentioned my looks. I am mid-30, male. I have short hair, I wear glasses, and I am wearing now white shirt with black patterns, stripe patterns. Let me continue with my presentation. And because we belong to SFAC, Seoul Center for Art, with the coexistence of Center, we do play some roles to cater into the needs of the disabled in terms of art and culture, and we're very proud of this role. On top of the residency feature, we also provide other services such as art mentoring for kids with disabilities, Project A, and also we have campaign and competitions so that people can show their art. We are also initiating some movements so that there's collaboration between the disabled and non-disabled. Just like all the graphs and statistics shared, I believe that generally things are divided into artists with disabilities and artists without disabilities. And I think that for artists with disabilities to be free and to have access to all the space to showcase their arts, I think artists with disability definitely has a disadvantage when it comes to securing those residents and spaces. That is why we focus on giving access to an actual space, and we have to make sure that wheelchairs are freely usable. We provide all the conditions and requirements so that we can help assist creating art. And now I would like to move on to planned exhibition. I believe that people with disabilities, if they're artists, they tend to get some funding and get some financial support, but it's very rare for them to hold an exhibition in a large-scale hall because, of course, there could be many different reasons, but they do not have a network that can be formed from professional academic backgrounds and networks. So they only tend to communicate within the people with disabilities itself. So that is why when we plan an exhibition, we want to make sure that we work with curators who are active and vibrant in the scenes so that we can provide an occasion or an opportunity so that the artists with disabilities can overcome their own space and horizon and have a chance to meet outer world artists as well. One of the major questions we have is, how do we define disability art? What is the definition of disability art? Maybe this is a very fundamental point of concern. Disability art is a topic that has been recently been called in various art fields, including curating, but there's ambiguity because is it for creators with disabilities, or is it for disabled people as audiences, or is it for just dealing with a disability as a subject? I believe that everything could be right, and I can't define that disability art is blah blah blah. I think what needs is we need to ask the right questions to understand what it is. But at the same time, because we are a public agency who has to provide proper policies and initiatives for funding and support of these people, we need to be logical and have some legal groundwork as well, especially the Republic of Korea, where we provide a lot of support for arts and public support. We have to take this burden as a responsibility to share what is the right approach that we need to take. Some people want a contemporary art comparison and would like to network, but some creators just want a single room for artwork. And also, for people with developmental disabilities, they do not have communication skills to share what they would like to have or do. So instead, their parents tend to be the voice of themselves. So sometimes it's very ambiguous. Is it actually what they want or what their parents would like to see? So based on our individuality and uniqueness, we need to seek various ways to discover and blossom the aesthetic potential of each person with disability. But I also sometimes think about it because I do not have a disability. I tend to, maybe what if I have prejudice or stigma about something that I would like to pursue or what I believe is right. And the second challenge we have is that we just tend to generally see everything as a disability. We actually have many different artists who reside in our center, coming from very different types of disabilities, and depending on what type of disability you tend to have different identities. There's a different speed of work and meet different needs. And to cater all these different needs in one space, we do need a lot of funding and we have to have full understanding of their situations and conditions. And because we have different interpretations about what disability art is, I think our challenge tends to be more complicated. So in that sense, do we really want to pursue disability art to be included as one of the main artist streams or industries? Or do we really want to have our own aesthetics of disability art? If the answer it lies in the latter, then we have to ask ourselves, are we prepared for this? And by asking these quality questions, I believe that we can grow.
Hello, everyone. I'm author Hwasoo. Nice to meet all of you. I have a dark black short hair. I also have dark black eyes with dark black glasses and wearing a round neck t-shirt in gray color. And I just look like a very typical male in his 40s. And the reason I came here today because I've been working on disability arts and also I have launched exhibitions. And through these experiences, I gained some insights that I wanted to share here today. But what I want to talk about today is the other side of barrier free. Not only the exhibitions that I have been planning for a few years, but also the other exhibitions where they promote the barrier free. Because I think barrier free also belongs to the technology area. So I don't think there is a problem with the technology, but I found some problems in the design that does not meet the expectations. So in a way, it kind of looked like they're trying to prove that they are disability sensible. So those things started to catch my eyes. So when I planned an exhibition recently, we built the wheelchair ramp, but because of that, we might not be able to open the door. So we had to set up some staffs on standby to open the door for the non-disabled. And also we prepared sign languages and all the other things. So the exhibition kind of looked perfect. So I checked out an exhibition myself and well, in the past, if we were not barrier free, we had to explain about things, why like we're not barrier free. But when I got there, I saw that they were so confident that they'll not have any problem because they are perfectly barrier-free. So I couldn't relate to that, honestly. Kind of felt some distance there. So I kind of started to think about the problems of this barrier-free just to show off, which has just become a habitual pattern. And not only the barrier-free, but there's also universal design, which all need cost to do these political activities. However, I'm sure you figure it out easily just by looking at it for a moment. I mean, there are so many different types of disabilities. So if we are to build a specific facility for specific disability, that it could incur bigger cost. When we have some issues related to the disabilities, it was about the subway elevator. People started to ask questions, why do we need to have all the lifts for all the subway stations? So this could be an example. The elevators in the subway or for the overpass, I mean, that's an elevator for all, not just the disabled, but the non-disabled also use the lifts. I mean, over 90% of the subway stations in Korea have elevators. So from the non-disabled perspective, they could think they have done everything they should. So it is a kind of typical non-disabled perspective, which is imbalanced. The emotional barrier between the disabled and the non-disabled is the highest, I think. And there's some kind of awkwardness between the two groups. We should have more opportunities to communicate with each other, to encounter with each other. However, with this unilateral approach, just by trying to solve everything, just by installing some facilities for the disabled, it's not enough.
Hello, good evening or good morning. So my name is Dirk Sorge. I work as an artist and cultural educator in Saxony and Berlin for more than 10 years now. The topics that I'm interested in are technology, or the way that we use technology to shape our everyday life and our perception. I'm interested in the way that we construct normality, or like the concepts that form what we think is normal and not normal. And also the topic ableism is more prominent in my recent works. I'm not sure if you know the term ableism. It means that you judge a person or a group of people based on their abilities, and this often leads to discrimination of people with disabilities, but also other people who are like stigmatized in society. So the term ableism is in Germany it's getting more prominent now, but it's still not very widely known. I'm not sure how it is in Korea, if the term is known in Korea. So my works include videos, installations, performances, and computer programs. So on the first picture, you see a group of people standing in a gallery space, and they are surrounding a kind of bed or stretcher where I'm laying on. So the person is tattooing something on my chest. So you can see her holding a tattoo needle, a sign that people who are blind or visually impaired use in Germany when they are in the traffic, for example, when they walk over the street. they used to have these signs on their arm or on their chest to tell car drivers, for example, that here, pay attention, it's a person with a visual impairment or a blind person, so please pay attention. And as I told you, I was still studying art at that point, and I have a vision impairment, but most people didn't know at that point. So it was a kind of outing for me, or a kind of public showing that I belong to this group of people who can wear this sign in public space. So it was a very important message for me to, identify with this group of people who are legally allowed to have this sign. But of course, normally you don't have this as a tattoo on your chest, but you have it on your clothes or somewhere to stick onto. Yeah, but it was like a very permanent sign for me to show, here I am part of this group, and I'm not ashamed to show this. And it was funny because when I was studying visual arts, many people didn't know and didn't expect a person with vision impairment to be there, because in their mind it was a little bit strange to study visual art when you have a vision impairment. So my most recent work from this year is called Cure Department, and until now it has two parts, so part 1 and part 2. And part 1 of the Cure Department is an installation with a tuning fork, and this tuning fork is tuned to 528 hertz, and I'm showing this fork together with a mallet on a pedestal and a text. And you can see one photo of this installation, and in the background you see a photo hanging on the wall and headphones, which are not part of my installation, but that were part of an exhibition that was shown in Dresden in this April. And the photo that you see is by Steven Solbrig, who is another artist with disability. And we were having this group exhibition together with Erik Bayer, who is also an artist with disability living in Dresden. And so I did the first part of Cure Department for this exhibition, which was called Uncanny Ally. And so the story behind this tuning fork is pretty interesting. I was researching about different frequencies, so for another project basically, but I found on a side note that some people believe that certain frequencies have the ability to heal your body or heal your soul, and there's a big market of esoteric products or shops who are selling some things that you can use for healing, and it's a big market, and a lot of hope and promises are going into these products. And for example, this tuning fork, this 528 hertz, it's supposed to heal your DNA. So if you hit the tuning fork with a mallet, it will make a sound, and this sound is, the frequency of the sound is 528 hertz, and this frequency is supposed to repair your DNA. And I think the promise is, if you do it right, then after a while all your illnesses will go away, you will be healthy again. And of course, in the context of disability, the concept of healing is very interesting, because healing always implies that you are not correct. Something is wrong with you, and someone from outside will tell you what to do, what you need to do to be cured or to be healed. And I think for myself, this notion of healing is very patronizing, and it always has this hierarchical structure, and I think this is very interesting. And also in this context, people are making money with the hope the hope of disabled or ill people who are investing money to buy these tuning forks, for example, or other products that you can use for healing. And they are always trying to be an alternative medicine, like alternative way of healing, because the normal medicine somehow is not able to heal your body or your soul or your mind or whatever. And it's a big capitalist market now, this alternative way of healing. I will show you a short video clip now from Cure Department Part 2, which is also using this idea of frequencies and combining it with meditation exercises, and from a critical perspective, looking on self-meditation, self-healing, and self-optimization, also with a little bit of humor. So I will show the clip now. It has English subtitles.
Du musst jetzt wirklich entspannt sein. Worauf wartest du denn? Sonst können wir dich nicht heilen. Und wir müssen dich heilen, weil du so nicht bleiben kannst. Das weißt du doch. Darum bist du dort und wir sind hier, weil du noch nicht zu uns passt. Weil du noch nicht zu uns passt.
And these frequencies, they are like a mixture between ancient Greek theory and medieval monk practices of singing, and even Buddhist traditions. At least that's what the online shops are telling you when you buy these products. And basically I'm combining these frequencies with some meditation exercises, or I'm using my own voice to give exercises. And I'm of course making fun of these meditation practices, because as far as I see it, they are focusing on the individual and the individual person that needs to relax. And by doing this, they're taking the responsibility away from the society, and they're saying, okay, you are doing something wrong. You as an individual, you are not correct. You're not tuned right. You have to change yourself instead of changing the society. And I think this is a big difference. And these kinds of meditations who are focusing on the individual, they are putting even more stress on the person who's already in stress, or maybe already is discriminated by society. And now someone from outside is telling you, you just need to relax more, then everything will be all right. But in fact, it won't be all right until society will start to change and adapt and to be really inclusive. So that's why I'm making fun or criticizing these kind of meditation exercises. But of course, in other contexts, it's totally fine to do it, and it makes sense if it helps you. But I think on a theoretical level, it's interesting to really critique these kind of settings. And at least if people are making money with buying some products, I hope this was giving you a little bit insight into my artistic practice, and you will have an interesting panel discussion. And thanks again for inviting me. Hope to see you soon live again. Bye-bye.
Hello. So should I introduce myself? I was just introduced, and I will be the moderator for this panel discussion. Hyun, and I'm in my mid-50s, male, I'm wearing these black glasses. My hair is not that long in dark color. And actually, my office is really cold today, so I'm wearing a thick jumper around my shoulder. Thank you for inviting me to this significant event. Dr. Kate, Mr. Yoo, and Mr. Lee, and Dirk. All of you didn't really categorize disability art, but it is more like a world that could be accepted by connecting with the other parts of the world. And regarding our first presenter, it was more about the art history and the contemporary art and how disability art is being consumed. And within the contemporary art, especially in art, we called outside art. It also relates to the disability type that I'm involved in. While it was very important topic back then, and it was an opportunity that let the disability art go into the limelight against the mainstream. But disability art is something unique, something special, and that kind of image also was fixated back then. And many of the authors in their groups that I work with work between the boundaries of the disabled and non-disabled in terms of creating their works. So my first question to Dr. Kate is about the radicalism. So could you specify on how inclusive curation can be done radically? Being radical is the Hawk perspective. But when we say inclusive curatorial, are you referring to the zero barrier between the disabled and non-disabled, or are you saying that you dream of a world where there is no line between the disabled and the non-disabled? Or were you trying to say that you were radical and passionate enough to promote it?
Thanks for your question. That's a difficult one to answer, actually. I think it's important that we recognize that disability is something that some people are actually proud of, and that being different or having a different experience or a different body from other people can be something that can be a catalyst for creativity. And that's how I see inclusive practice or accessible curating as radical, because that's not the norm. That's not what currently dominates the way contemporary art exhibitions are produced. That's not how museums and contemporary art galleries operate. There are certain kind of standards of who gets shown in contemporary art galleries. And I think we mostly know, what kind of people get shown in contemporary art galleries. We have our so-called blue chip artists. It's a very, very well-known fact, at least in the context that I'm working in Anglo-speaking cultures, that who's reflected or who's shown in contemporary art galleries and museums is often very male, white, able-bodied people. And that needs to change. It's not just about showing people with disabilities. It's about showing people with all kinds of different bodies, because that's what exists in society. And I think we've gotten to a point in society, we have a convention, a UN convention on the rights of people with disabilities. And that UN convention demands that people with disabilities have a space in society. No matter what kind of body you have, no matter where you come from in the world, you have a right to participate in society to the fullest extent. And that's something that needs to be recognized by museums and other arts institutions. It needs to be recognized by freelancers working in the arts as well. And those of us who hold power and hold privilege myself as a white woman, I know I have a certain amount of privilege and power that I carry with me from job to job. It's about what you do with that power and privilege. And for me, the most radical thing that I can do, the most, the way in which I can change society, if you want to call it that, the way I can address such vast imbalances within the arts sector is by using that power and privilege in order to do things a bit differently, whether that's speaking from my position as a disabled woman, whether that's speaking from my position also as a mother within society working in the arts, whether that's sometimes maybe even stepping back and stepping aside and letting my colleagues, for example, colleagues of colour who are very misrepresented in an Anglo-speaking context, maybe that means stepping aside and giving them the stage. So it's about recognising where imbalances lie within the arts and then seeking to do whatever you can do with whatever resources you have and whatever power and privilege you have to change the situation. And some might say, well, this is a social activity, this isn't curating. Fine, if people want to call it that, that's great. But why work in the arts then? What are the arts for? And maybe that's a very heavy philosophical question. But I think that's a question that we need to ask. I think, if we want to work in the arts, why are we doing what we do? Why do we curate? Why do we help artists make their work? And why benefit some at the detriment to others? So I hope that answers your question about at least what I mean when I say radical work or radical actions.
I think you are creating a reality that was only in our expectation and imagination. So thank you and for sharing what's happening. And I feel like we're living in a society where politics and power games are playing a big role. And I hope that hierarchy should be demolished and then we can work together to open up new possibilities, just like what Lanke has shared. And I feel very positive and joyful after your comment. And now let's move on to Seungjoo Lee to direct my question. Seungjoo Lee, I know that you belong to Jamsil Seoul Arts Center for the Disabled. I know that the name has changed recently. Correct. And after listening to your presentation, and I think what I went through and what you are going through, conflict, limitations and restrictions, when you shared your challenges, that's exactly what I felt when I belonged to the organization. And among all the points that you mentioned earlier, when you think about a creative studio, this is a space centering on creation, like art creation, art making. And if you think about it, there are many different types of disabilities. And you can't say, oh, this is going to be positive for a certain group, but not positive for a certain group. But if you look at presentations from Kate and Dirk, I think history is what's very important. There is historic references. They tend to look back in the past and see how disabled people are depicted and expressed, how that is reproduced and created some theory or perception in the public. And I think that's a very specific characteristic of our German speakers today. And because this creative studio has the longest history in Korea, I want to ask you, like, what is your orientation? What are you focusing on? Because there could be many different relationships and concepts. Are you focusing on freedom of expression? Like how much range and scope can they work at your center, utilizing the space? First and foremost, in the case of disability art, I think what's most trending is how there's a person with disability, how that person is going to talk about their experience, their body, what they go through and what they went through. And if you look at the trend and flow of the recent few years of disability art, if you think about art scenes in Korea, I think people without disabilities were put like that, set the stage and set the environment, even though they did not have disabilities. So I feel like environmentally it was staged and maybe it was not the right approach. I don't think we have enough opportunities and space for artists with disabilities to actually talk about their own life and what they face and their thoughts yet. And I know that we have many artists with disabilities, and I'll talk to them regularly, but I think it's half and half. Some artists tend to utilize their disability as a great motive for their works, but half of them, the other half, would focus on something else. Instead of their identity with disabilities, there are themes that they're interested, but they're somewhat not so related to their condition or the fact that they're disabled. So I would say it's half and half. You know, an artist would pursue what they want. That's what they do, whether it's you belong to a certain country or cultural zone. You can't say something's more advanced or something's not advanced, of course. But at the same time, because you are a creative studio, I don't think that's simply a space where you create arts. This is a platform where you can form networks with other people and other artists. So I was just more curious about how you are actually utilizing the space. That's not just a studio. And there was actually a question from our audience. I hope that you can answer this. But one of the questions said, if you think about Jamsil Creative Studio, you changed the name to Seoul Creative Center for the disabled. Is there any reason why you decided to include the term disability to the new name? And what do artists actually think about it? Yes, so to give you some background about why we decided to change our name, and I actually get asked many questions related to this. When we were established, first it wasn't run by the Seoul Art Center, SFAC. It was run by a Disability Art Association, but then the host got changed to Seoul SFAC. So in the past it was Disability Art Creative Studio, and then now it changed to Jamsil Creative Studio, and then it's going again to Seoul Creative Studio for the disabled. So I would say there are 3 different keywords I can utilize for this explanation. There's a change from Jamsil to Seoul, and of course this reflects the physical condition why we had to move. It's not Jamsil. We're now going to Daehangno, which is where the old Seoul National University was, or a specific district will be Dongseung-dong. We also thought about maybe using Dongseung instead of Seoul. But if you think about policy environment between 15 years ago and now, there's quite a huge difference. In the past, compared to the past, we have many district-based organizations. Yeah, and instead of creative studio, we're saying art center for the disabled, and we are purposefully using the term disability. The reason why we're doing it, we had disability on the surface, and then we hid it, and then now back on. The reason why we decide to put disability in our name again is because now there is a focus on disability art. It's actually positive and favorable for it to use this term. As Kate mentioned, disability, like identity of disability, as a person with disability, I don't think people necessarily see it as something that's negative, something that they have to hide. There are more and more people who affirm and think positively about their condition. And the fact that we changed from studio to center, it's actually a very similar trend. We support all genre creation and coexistence of disabled and non-disabled. instead of a disability that's officially approved by the government, there are diseases or queer or something that's not officially recognized, but people consider abnormal. And we wanted to have a space to talk about these issues. And as a result, we had interviews with these people and then created this into YouTube videos and created content so that it could be shared by other people. As I said, we have to discuss and address disabilities that are not officially recognized by the government. We need to be able to create the space as well. This is my sincere hope. Okay, thank you. So, for the socially marginalized and the minorities could be also addressed and discussed as maybe a psychological disability. We can name it differently, but you want to expand the range and scope. That, and you have that will. Yes, correct. If you think about Germany or Europe, or maybe more of the Western Hemisphere, I think people pay more attention to so-called queer, their rights, their identity. It's more respected and it's more openly discussed, and they also have legal rights as well. But in Korea, we don't even recognize and give the legal rights to them as well. And I think this is how it is connected to our discussion. The fact that we recognize their status, their identity, and their status, we should create an environment so that they're officially respected legally. Law, this is something that's quite necessary for sure. And as I have been working in this industry, I saw many parents who were debating whether to get the disability, verification certificate or not. And even those who have disabilities, they have quite a difficulty to talk about their disability openly. So being recognized institutionally about their disability and emotionally being recognized, we still need a balance between the two. For that, when that happens, we can truthfully overcome, I think, discrimination and the disparity. And it's not the issue of individuals. The society has to have the will to address this issue. Yes, thank you very much. And now let's move on to Hwasoo, the next speaker.
유하수님은 일종의 번역에 대한 이야기를 해주신 거로 이해를 했습니다. 그러니까 베리어
I
프리라고.
want to give a question to Mr. Yu. I think you were mostly talking about the translation. So when you mentioned barrier free, well, it's a kind of facilitator, but there is a question that whether it is actually comprehensible. So when I read your presentation in advance, I thought about the relationship between the lung and baral, which is the language and the word. I mean, we need to have the right grammar, and there are many practices that we have to follow for the language, the given language. However, when it comes to baral, the living word, I mean, it cannot be right grammatically, but sometimes it will work better for communication. So it was very interesting to watch your works. And before we talk about barrier free and others, I want to know what motivated you to be interested in the disability art? And was there any change in your life because of this? Yes. When I worked for the disability art, when I planned or administered exhibitions, the most question that I got was that, are you also disabled? When were you planning to do this? Well, so I can tell that they were prejudiced. And when there are cases that we are funded by special governmental agencies, for instance. So there were many people accusing me of trying to benefit from that. I've been working on the labor and play, so I was kind of expanding my area. It was about the usage and being normal and abnormal. And I also talked about the laborers. So it was only natural that I started talking about normal operation and abnormal operation. So actually, I was not first interested in the disabled, but I was interested in the disability. So I'm still doing my works related to that. But as I go along the way, I think it is really difficult topic to touch. I don't think you should not feel easy to embrace this topic. And disability is a social agenda. The relationship between the disabled and the non-disabled is a social issue. So whatever politics or plannings or seminars to be done within the disabled space, but as long as we cannot solve the issues with the non-disabled, we'll not be able to solve the issues truly. And even when we say there's an exhibition, it's very free, but there was a question saying that we have not seen the disabled actually in the exhibition. So there were cases when I did the exhibition, there were only a few disabled audience that I was disappointed. But still, what I think important is that when they are the non-disabled audience, I want to know, and I believe that I'm playing a role there by influencing them. So in that sense, I think I'm trying to make a little bit of a change here. And I think not just me, but we all should try to make people come more to the exhibitions, regardless of the disabled or non-disabled. Well, this could be lengthy, but I mean, there are people with disabled and their family or their people who could develop into disability. So I think we should expand the discussion of disability. Well, if we make that kind of approach, we don't have to call it disability art, but we could naturally start working on the art related to the disability, which could lead to more abundant outcomes of disability art. Yes, thank you for the answer. Well, since I'm in the same arena, I feel the same every day. Why are there not disabled audience in the exhibition? I mean, they have the right to move. We have prepared a facility for them, but it's still not easy for them to access. In order to enter the National Contemporary Museum, I mean, regardless of whether you're disabled or non-disabled, when there are people who feel easy to access the art institution or gallery or museum, there are who are not, because there is this kind of image of the art is something that can only be enjoyed by some special people. So, I think we should let the public know the value of enjoying the art. And of course, and when we already have this kind of prejudice in the society, then it will be even more difficult for the disabled to enjoy this art. And there are questions coming from the floor. Now in Korea, now the National Association of the Disabled is fighting for the rights to move. And also the government is purchasing art and having this art exhibition for the disability art at the same time. What is the role or definition of barrier-free in curating at this moment? Well, I don't think it's really different. But when we say barrier-free exhibition, well, it is to open up the accessibility for the audience to have closer view and experience of the art in the exhibition, to have more encounters between the two different groups. And we have asked questions to all the presenters. Please feel free to do so. Kate?
What we really need to recognize, and I think the other two panelists have also touched on this as well, is that the systems of oppression have been in existence for such a long time that it's very difficult to undo that in a short amount of time. And inclusion, I always say inclusion it's a long-term process. It's not something that you can achieve through one exhibition or one event or even, a few years. It's something that takes a really, really long time. And, I sort of think to myself, why would I, as a disabled person, want to go into a space where my body doesn't fit? It doesn't feel comfortable. And when I look at the art around me, it's by people who have a very, very different experience from me. And the artwork that I do see on the walls about me is, they're representations of disabled people as beggars or sinners or, people who have to overcome something. There's this charitable view of disability that we have to do something for the poor disabled people. And, Dirk spoke about this with his art practice and the research that he did into art collections and how people with disabilities have been portrayed for hundreds of years. Why would I want to go into a space that actively promotes that representation? I would prefer to go into a space that turns that representation on its head and flips the narrative and starts to tell a very different story of disabled people as strong, as empowered, as creative, and as people who, make amazing art. And I think, our two other panelists have showed us that is possible within a Korean context.
너무 인상적인 답변이었고요.
Thank you for answering a very difficult question. It was very impressive. There's a concept of unlearning related to disability art. It's also an agenda for the galleries or art institutions. I think unlearning should be done not only by the disabled, but also the non-disabled. The disabled should be proud of themselves and should overcome the stigma given by the society. And also, for the non-disabled, we should realize the processes that we had and the things that we didn't recognize. But like you said, it cannot be done through a few workshops, but it will take very long time and we could get tired over time.
So let me provide my comment. How are we going to define art? Of course, if you think about contemporary art, I think it depends on what we are looking at, what we are supposed to look at. I think that is something very important in modern times. Of course, if you think about disability arts, I tend to be very careful about what words I choose, but I think by disability art, we can really discuss what's kind of uncomfortable. To be honest, last year, even though I belong to a public agency, I had a chance to talk about sexual minorities. I think the reason why I was able to talk about it is because I used the lens of disability. And there is protests about securing mobility rights of the wheelchaired people. And then there's also, at the same time, promotion and programs where great paintings created by disabilities are being sold and purchased by art collectors. And these two disparities are being shown. So political leaders are choosing what they want to use for their promotion and for political rights, but at the same time they are turning a blind eye to something that's very sensitive, which is people with disabilities movements to secure better rights for their mobilities. This is quite uncomfortable, and that's my personal stance. By the lens of disability, I believe that we can now focus on something that was ignored so far. For all artists, disability artists, of course, the concept mobility cannot be applied to all. But I think there's a term called barrier conscious, not barrier free, but barrier conscious. So what does that mean? Barrier free is something that we ideologically should pursue, but at the same time, we have to first recognize that there is physical and emotional barrier first to make barrier free. And I think disability art could be a tool to recognize that there are barriers that we didn't really used to think about. And as a public agency, as a person who belongs to government administration, of course, it's difficult for me to do everything, and I'm not saying I can do all for this, but I know you mentioned the word called platform, and there are many different artists who work with us, and then they also leave sometimes, but as we provide the space and opportunities, I hope that we can get closer to a world with barrier conscious, where it's barrier conscious and barrier free. And I believe disability art could be some concept that we can utilize to get closer to that goal. That's my personal idea. Thank you very much for staying with us until the end, sharing your thoughts and ideas. And I work in this realm, but as I have this opportunity to hear all your experiences and expertise, I also came to a realization about the value of what I do, and I also could access all the different nuances of different works. Yes, I'll continue to work harder for a better society. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And let's call it an end. This is the end of our roundtable. Thank you very much.